Yeah, we do so bad at this, I'm not gonna lie.
We're
like,
recording.
this is awesome. Well, there's our blooper for this episode.
Happy Halloween, Nick.
I don't think he's
No, he is recording. There's a little red dot in the top left corner that says recording.
Are you
can
sure?
take a look.
Yeah, he's recording. Awkward.
Listeners, we're doing this live for the first time.
This is our, well, it's not going to be live for them, but like
Not
we are
live
in person for the first time.
We're together in person.
And our guest is here for the first time in person. We'll introduce her in a second, but how are you?
I'm doing well. We had a good... So, to answer the question from last week, we weren't sure if we were going to be together for this weekend.
This is
like
true.
Halloween or whatever, but we did. And what were we?
We were the podcast. We went to the party as the podcast.
Yes.
Pictures to come. I guess we'll post them with episode 15's post because that's the Halloween episode. Okay, yeah, we're getting there. This is new for us. How was your weekend?
My weekend was good. What did I do? I worked a little bit. I don't know why I don't prepare for like what I was doing this weekend. Last time, a couple episodes ago, I had to check my calendar about what I did. Oh, I got a new phone finally, or at least I ordered a new phone.
Golf clap for sure. I don't know if the mic picked that up.
There we go. In front of the.
There we go.
In front of the microphone. Yeah, it's not an iPhone. To all your iPhone listeners, I apologize, but I
will hold my comments.
I don't really apologize because I'm an Android person. But I got a Pixel 6 to come in the end of this coming week, so I'm excited. Hopefully, I enjoy it. I think it will be good because my phone is 3 years old and...
Is it what is it?
I currently have a Galaxy S9, which I don't know if that means anything to you.
I have no clue what that means.
I guess that would mean since what? You have the iPhone 12 Pro Max, right?
I have the 12 Pro Max, yes.
So I guess it would be the equivalent of having like an iPhone 10.
Okay, so that's not that old.
Or like 8.
Yeah,
there was
that's
no
not
9,
that old.
right?
I was at the Apple store yesterday and I literally almost bought everything. Like, I'm not kidding. I don't have the money for it, but I like pretended that I have the money for it, and I was like, I want that. Start a point of due wish list.
You also DJ'd for the store, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I had Rain on Me playing on the iPad, or not the iPad Mini, the HomePod Mini, and that was great.
That's a whole lot of fun.
Yes, it was.
I also played tennis, a little bit of tennis. Our guest is an avid tennis player, which I'll get into in a little bit, but I played tennis in a park in Boston with our friend Mary. She's been on the podcast, and there was someone, a kid who was like playing on the court next to us, and he's like, "Can we play with you?" And so we made a new friend, Peyton. Shout out Peyton, and we've seen him multiple times. We've played tennis.
Sounds like you were needed in that space.
I was needed in that space, and I wasn't necessarily needed, but it was fun. It was good. Got to meet new people. That's what's different, I think, from I live in a suburb of Boston versus like a city where you can like walk to different places versus when you're in a suburb, sure you can walk or bike, but you kind of have to drive to different places. So it was kind of cool to like when we were at Loyola, we could walk more, and plus we didn't really have a car, to just kind of meet someone just in a park, in a public space. I don't know. I enjoyed that. It felt fun. But how are you? How was your week, your weekend?
It was good. I was tired. I wasn't supposed to go to that party last night. I was working, but my work didn't have power, so not epic.
And explain to our viewers why it didn't have power.
We had it was a nor'easter. For anybody that doesn't know what that is,
I don't either.
I don't either.
Hi, welcome to Point of View. I'm Justin.
I'm Nick.
And on this very special episode of Point of View, we welcome my family friend, Marion Fields, to talk about her experience with breast cancer and her family experience dealing with cancer and supporting family members. Nick, let's talk about things from our
point of view. Hey. But it knocked out my power for like 5 days. So I went to the party instead, and it was a good time. My fun story from the party was I was talking to this guy. We were sitting on the couch, whatever. And I forget how it started, but he was like, oh, I go to BC, Boston College, but I'm not like, he was like, I'm a terrible person. He was joking, but he was like, I'm a terrible person or something. I don't know exactly how I said it. I was like, oh, you seem like super nice, whatever. And I was like, I didn't go to BC, but I went to BC High, Boston College High School. And he goes, oh, I just started going to school high. And I meant like I went to the high school, Boston College High School. He thought I meant like I go to classes high. Yeah. And I was like, I do not. But he was like, oh, I just started that. And I was like, oh, nice. I didn't hear what he said. And then I processed it. And I was like, oh, okay. That's not what I was saying, but okay. But yeah, he was drunk, so like it's fine. But yeah, that was my fun fact of the weekend.
I think that's such a fantastic interaction. I don't know.
It really was.
And was he high at the moment?
No, he was. Maybe. He was drunk. He said he wanted to smoke. I think he went out afterwards to smoke. But he was like, yeah, he was like, oh, I just started because he goes to BC, so it's funny because he was like, I know now I'm explaining the joke. Jokes aren't funny if they need to be explained. But he said I go to class high, meaning like I go to BC while I'm high, and I was like, I went to BC High, the high school. Clearly,
we're not comedians, and this is not a comedic podcast. Although sometimes we make at least ourselves laugh.
I make myself laugh
as I'm joking.
Do you want to introduce
this is a very special episode. As many of you know, this episode is not out in October because scheduling and...
That's our bad.
It's our bad. But October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And so Nick and I had a discussion about, we're all guys, obviously, and but we wanted to do something to kind of raise awareness about breast cancer, tell stories. And so this is a very special episode where we have our guest here who is a breast cancer survivor and has, as many of us do, have experience with breast cancer, either directly or indirectly in our families, friends that we know. So we were very happy to have her here. She is one of my mom's closest friends. They met in 2008 playing tennis, and very quickly our families became very close. She's a wonderful mother of 3 children, Alexander, Anastasia, and Jocelyn, and her shadow right next to her, Riley. I might ask once you come in what breed she is, because she's so cute. She is an avid tennis player, as I said, as well as a pickleball player. She was part of the group that played pickleball in my backyard during quarantine that I mentioned a couple episodes ago. Like my mom, she enjoys indulging in her daily Diet Coke, which she has here as we're recording. She's very easy to talk to. She's honestly like family to me, like another mother to me. Please welcome Miss Marion Fields. Hi, Marion.
Wow, thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Nice to be here with you guys.
Thank you for being our first in-person guest. Not only have we not recorded together, but we've never had a guest in person, so.
Well, you should do more of it. You guys are good together. You don't
need
to be separate.
Thank
you. Togetherness is kind of fun.
It is.
The banter was surprisingly natural. Once we got into it, we just needed to get a conversation going.
Before we had a podcast, I did not mean to. He didn't just pick me up off the street and say, hey, you're coming with me.
Hey, want to start a podcast?
Yeah. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. Thank goodness the storm has ended. Yes. And now we have all the power back so we can do the podcast together.
Yes, my apologies for that. I was out for 5 days.
No, completely understand that.
Did you lose power?
Did not lose power, thankfully.
I'm jealous.
Did not lose power. But I've heard a lot of people without heat. It was quite cold a couple nights ago, going down to for us, the 40s from going, coming out of summer and everything. But yeah.
Do you, I know you have a house down in Cape Cod. Do you close that for the winter, or is it still? No,
it's wide. It's still open.
Okay.
And they lost power down there.
Yeah.
So we were going to go down, but we're also on a septic system.
Yeah.
And without power, forget about flushing the toilet.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, fair enough. Forget it. But yeah, so I think that's all resumed, and hopefully everybody's back in order. And I don't know, though, this morning the news said people were still out of power. So
right.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Your neighborhood just got it back yesterday?
They got it back, and then someone knocked on our door, and he was in uniform of some sort, and I did my usual hiding. Because I hate going to the doors.
The doorbell rings.
So then my dad...
It's outside.
Okay, I just saw B, speaking of fears, last episode. he knocked on the door and he was like, so we're cutting your power for the next hour because we have to work on it. And I was like, get out of my house. I didn't actually say that, but those were my thoughts because they cut it again. That's when I called you and I was like, I'm without power again.
That's terrible.
Yeah, but it's back now. And we have a generator, but the first night we didn't have gas for it and the gas stations were closed. Like everywhere around us was closed.
Oh, I bet.
So, yeah, that was fun.
Not good.
It kind of makes you think about how much we rely on electricity and like
think
about parts of the world that don't have access to it.
Yes. I mean, we were supposed to record on Thursday, right? Was it Thursday or Wednesday?
We started Tuesday.
We were going to go Tuesday, and then
Thursday. It was Thursday.
Yes.
Yeah.
And here it is, our normal Sunday. When we record, which was not planned, but that's what happened.
It was all good. Still in October 31st. So
that is true. Okay, yeah, there we go. We
recorded in
October.
So okay.
Yes,
so
and it's important for year round, so maybe there's something in there.
Yes. As you know, we wanted to talk a little bit about raising awareness for breast cancer, kind of sharing stories. I know that I've been affected by breast cancer indirectly. My grandmother had it, passed away from it. I know that you have been directly and indirectly affected by it. Nick,
my grandmother died of it in 2008, I believe.
Okay.
Yes, she had it for 10 years, and then I think it went away and then came back, but she had it for a while.
It was a similar story with my grandmother. Yeah. Is she had it, and the oncologist said this is the type of breast cancer that someone, say, in their like 20s or 30s would get. But she went through chemo and everything, and went into remission, was good, and then it came back with a vengeance, and eventually she passed away with it. But anyway, we wanted to invite you on, and thank you for choosing to share, your story and your journey and your knowledge about breast cancer and so many things with our audience. But we want to invite you to just kind of walk us through your experience both indirectly and directly with breast cancer. And
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, my journey with that, you guys talked about your grandmother's passing and everything. So for me, my grandmother did have breast cancer when she was much older, but my journey and my story really is residing with my parents. So my mother had a brain tumor. She didn't have breast cancer, but her sister had breast cancer very young, in her 30s, and sadly perished. And it was devastating to my mom because she lost her sister. And so when my mom got diagnosed with a brain cancer, she just really kind of went very much inward and kind of lost the zest to fight it. Like, kind of felt it was her time, this is her time. And, her story was that when she was diagnosed and they gave her the diagnosis, she had, say, 4 years before she really had to do surgery. Then after the surgery, they did give her a year to live, and she really kind of just sort of gave up. Like, that was when I was in college, and I would come home from college, and she would just be kind of laying in the chair that I saw her last in, and she just had zero zip for life. But her story ends that it wasn't immediate that she passed. She was years, really, years and years, but sadly it wasn't quality of life, it was quantity of life for her. Mm-hmm. But from all that experience that I saw, so my mom did pass away young. She was 67. But, she was diagnosed at 48 with the brain tumor. Oh, wow. So, her journey was long, but I saw it as a young person and wanted my mom to have this kind of positive energy around the cancer. And I think it takes everybody in a different place. I think it's very scary. It can be very uncertain, like what is life going to be like for you, going forward. I do have friends now that have had a journey like mine, and they seem to all be taking it on in different ways, and the choice that I made was more based on my journey and what I knew from my family and my history of things and why I chose to do it. So, when I got my diagnosis, I wasn't shocked, so to say,
sure,
because I felt like I have 2 other sisters, and one of 3 of us might have gotten it somewhere along the way. So, when I was younger, before kids, I did have a kind of a benign tumor of sorts, and then they removed it. And not that I thought this was going to be my journey, but I wasn't really surprised when it did. And now, was I sad and upset? Absolutely, because the bottom line for me was to be there for my kids, where my mom really couldn't be. Because either the surgery, her type of cancer, which was brain, she just kind of like lost a lot of parameters. She just didn't do things, kind of lost the zip for life. So, on my end, I kind of said, I'm going to go full out and beat this thing, because I want to be there in the future for my family.
Right.
So, yeah.
May I ask? Yeah. My next question, my follow-up question is if you could like walk us through what you were feeling in that moment when you got that diagnosis, but you kind of just answered that. What is your advice for somebody who gets a similar or the same diagnosis? Like what do you have for advice for them?
Yeah, it's so hard. I guess if you would say who I am as a person, I'm a strong person. So, everybody takes things on so differently. It is shocking. It is uncomfortable. It is questionable because you don't know what today is going to feel like, and then, like a year from now. So, I've had a very good friend of mine who had children with me in my hometown, in this town that I grew up, I raised my children. And she, I remember when she called me on the phone and told me her diagnosis, and I thought, you go. You're going to do everything. It sounds like you're going to give it your 100% effort on beating back this disease. Well, unfortunately, in her case, if I could, go backwards, I might have suggested to her, her name was Susie, I would have said, do this, do more of this. But, when you get that diagnosis, and the doctors, unfortunately, they're not going to give you everything you need. Like, they're not going to tell you what to do. They're going to give you advice. They're going to tell you, this is the best idea. This is the percentage of survival. This will give you the best result. But in the end, there's no crystal ball to say whether or not those little teeny, cancer little molecules have moved from point A to point B, Right. And then sadly for my friend Susie, even though I felt like she did everything at that point, years later, she ended up with a metastatic disease, which eventually took her life. And so that's the hard part, because it is a mystery in some ways.
Right.
But I think if the listeners or everybody who's listening, I think my take on it is, if you get diagnosed, or if you have somebody who is diagnosed, just if they can do the maximum amount of treatment, whatever they can do to try to eradicate it from the get-go, that would be, something I would strongly advise. And back to your question what was your question again? Go back to that. Original question was, how did you feel?
Yeah, so what was, because I can only imagine, I can't imagine what that feels like. I know, I can't even say what my reaction would be. I don't know, but I would just be very afraid. I would be very scared, and I'm just a worrier naturally, so.
Yeah, and I think that's what happens. I think, when I think back, and I just go back to my mom, and I can't judge her for her choices that she made, I think when she actually sort of knew something was going on. I mean, she was having blackout episodes, and she should have probably got herself into the doctor before, but again, she was worried about what that meant. What did that mean for her? And I think there is a lot of worry in there. And so some of the decisions you make are based on the fact that you're worried or concerned or don't really know what to do. And so then you do rely a lot on the physician who's consulting with you and saying, you should do this, this, and this. So when I got the diagnosis, I definitely felt sad. I felt sad because I think I was I sort of knew something could be happening for me. My journey was, this thing before I had kids, and then after I had kids, just maybe 3 years prior, they noticed I had a biopsy, and they said, oh, you have this sort of ADH, it's called, and it was sort of a atypical ductal hyperplasia, where it's sort of the possibility of me getting it was making it greater for me to have a potential of having breast cancer, but there was no sort of guarantee that I was going to get it. So I kind of already had it in my head that, all right, maybe I should be thinking about it a little bit more. And we were kind of doing things to check me a little bit faster. Mm-hmm. But in my mind, I thought, I'm so young. I mean, when I finally did get this diagnosis, I was 52, and that's young. Like, I think of, I don't mean to say it in a bad way, but my grandmother, and sometimes, when you get older in life and stuff like that, things do catch up with you. But no matter when it happens, it's never a good thing for anybody. And it is sad for everybody. Yeah.
You talked a little bit about, we're advising to our listeners about if you get a diagnosis like this, go for, you said the maximum amount of treatment possible. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about when you received your diagnosis, what treatment options were provided to you, mm-hmm. and which one you ended up going with, and maybe why you ended up going with that one.
Sure. Yeah, so mine, let's see. So I talked a little bit about the fact that I had these biopsies. Mm-hmm. And so that brought me in again. That's why I went back in again. I had another biopsy in a different area on the same side. And so when I went in, I thought, okay, it's just another biopsy. They're going to probably find the same thing. It'll just be the atypical ductal hyperplasia. I'll be fine. But then when I got the call, and here's the weird thing, I got the call from a radiologist. I didn't even get a call from the doctor who I had been seeing,
Interesting.
So that is a little bit of medicine these days. I don't know if there's that personal one person who seems to be in charge of you all the time. I mean, some people do have that option or have that opportunity. I think just in my situation, it ended up being this person who I just last seen, which would be the radiologist. Okay. And so when she said that to me, I was sort of perplexed, like, wow, okay, this is real. And I was, like I said, shocked and sad. And so then I proceeded to go forward. Now, I did get second opinions and this, that, and the other thing, and it wasn't based on what was happening. It was, what would I do? What should I do? So, I could have done the route, which is a lumpectomy with radiation, and then they, check your lymph nodes, or you could, further it down the road with a double mastectomy or one side mastectomy. And so knowing all the things that were out there, and just the fact that I had already had 2 biopsies on one side, it just gave me kind of cause for a reflection of what really is going on there. Because again, when I first got that diagnosis, I thought, oh, this is going to affect me maybe 10 years from now, not 3 years from now. Mm-hmm. So I kind of had to put all those factors in, the fact that I do have I have cancer in my family. So, and also just, there's a lot to it where, you have to, even if you just do one side, now you have to make sure the other side. And all the times that I was going for my reviews of, my mammograms and all that other stuff, I was always the one to be called back in. So then you always went back in, and they would say, okay, well, it looks like this, but not like that. So there was always this kind of well, what is it? Are they really seeing it? Are they not seeing it? So that was kind of, in the end, what sort of pushed me to the fact that, okay, I'm just going to do both of them. I'm just going to get rid of both of them. Now, was that an easy decision? Absolutely not. It's like taking your limb and getting rid of it. It's part of you. Right. It's been part of me for years. So for me, it was oh God, what is that going to be like? What is that going to feel like? And so, I kind of went down that path, and that also aligns itself to finding the right doctor and getting them to hear you. And there was lots of crying. Don't let me sugarcoat this, I can talk about it now, but there's a lot of research on my end, and asking the right questions, and having your friends go with you, or your husband or your mother or father, whoever's with you, to go with you, and just to be a second set of ears to listen, to hear what's going on or what they're saying or suggesting to you. So
sure.
Yeah.
What do you think is, I'm just adapting it a little bit, what do you think, or what do you suggest as preventative measures that people can take? Obviously, you mentioned this before, you can do all the right things, and it can still affect you. But what do you suggest for young people, and not even just young women, because my friend messaged me earlier today, and they reminded me that it doesn't just affect women, men, and then there are people that identify with non-binary.
Right, exactly. Men can have it too, and it is something that many do not talk about because it's sort of like, well, that's a woman's thing. It's not a woman's thing. It's a everybody thing, and anybody can have it. And just like any cancers, and not to worry your viewers, because a lot of them are young, and you're going to be healthy forever. And honestly, it's just knowing to take care of yourself and to ask those questions. And if, like, I know when I would go into these doctors' offices, even as a young person, I would give my story. My mom had, brain tumor. Her sister had breast cancer. Her father, growing up, had pancreatic cancer. I mean, my list of cancers in my family on my mother's side was huge. But a lot of the doctors just were like, oh, there's no correlation. Well, fast forward to me getting the diagnosis. Now they want to put the pieces together. Now they want to puzzle it all together and say, oh, a link to this and a link to that. Now, maybe in that time frame, everybody's kind of figuring out that there are more links to each other. But as a young person, if you kind of have a question, just keep pursuing it. Don't think that, and we're all human, and the doctors are all human, and they're very smart, but you know yourself well and best out of all. So, I would just say, for a young person, don't be afraid of any of it. Just make sure you do get tested when time is right. And I don't know what their suggestion now for mammograms, if it's 30 or 40, but when they say go get it, go get it. Just do it.
It's the safest thing to do, right?
Right. For sure. For anybody, even for you guys, other cancers could crop up or, in general. And, it's just important to make sure you have a good physician and, don't be afraid if you miss one appointment. It's not that. It's just making sure you get in there at times and just, get checked.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you don't mind sharing, what is treatment like? Because I think a lot of people who haven't had cancer have maybe experienced it like, as somebody who loves someone with cancer, but what is it like as somebody going through that? And do you have any advice for somebody who is going through the actual treatment? Just even in terms of morale.
Yeah, I do think, it's all my own personal experience and what I saw from my mom and stuff. Making sure you ask a lot of questions, and when you start your treatment process, you're not blindsided. I've heard the good, bad, and the ugly, and it's like some people just put so much trust and everything into the system, and then they're shocked by their results because maybe they didn't do enough due diligence ahead of time. Now, it's hard. It's not easy to figure it all out. I have a background in biology, so I kind of understand a lot of the terminology that they throw at you, but somebody who's just like a layperson who's never heard the words metastatic, they're overwhelmed, and that's the hardest part about treatment. It's like they're overwhelmed. There's so much being thrown at them. I even just was on the phone with a woman who is a little older than me, but missed her appointments and then did go see somebody, and sure enough, she does have breast cancer, and she kind of wanted to take like the smaller steps. Like, all right, I'm just going to do this because I don't think it's anything but that. And that's all fine. Take your smaller steps, but you've got to be listening, and you've got to do your own research to figure out how this is going to go for you and what the best thing for you is. So for me, back to me as a person, I guess you'd have to say, I've got some strength behind me. I've definitely had some things in my life with my family members, that have made me a stronger character by the time I'm in my 50s, But like my treatment, I did a lot of crying prior to, because every time I would go somewhere and I would hear somebody's opinion and I would say, I don't want it this way, I want it that way. Like, for instance, when you do have a double mastectomy, obviously, you're just removing every bit of your breast tissue. And so then it's decisions. Do you want to put them back? Do you want to not have them? Do you want to wear a bra with like pads? So there's so many factors that you kind of have to think about. Like, what makes it good for you? And there was one woman I met early on that did the double mastectomy and did nothing. And she was great and she was happy. Now she told me, wearing the bra with the pads and all that other stuff, which were like prosthetics, to make it look like. She said they were hot and uncomfortable and this, that, and the other thing. So, okay, that put into one thought. And then, I heard from another person of a horrible story of where at the end of everything, it was the woman didn't have the symmetry that she thought she was going to have when waking up. And that put another thought in my head. Okay, symmetry. I got to think symmetry. So, by the time I made my decisions, and I remember one appointment, in fact, I went in and I was talking about getting the reconstruction, and the woman's like, oh, yeah, well, I think, your breasts are like tear-shaped, and we have these tear-shaped implants, but let me tell you, there could be a chance of receiving a different type of cancer. And I was thinking, what? Like, I'm running away from cancer. You're offering me something that possibly could give me yet a different kind of cancer? Like, no, thank you. But now that was my perception, And again, I've had a friend who just went through it, and she chose just doing the lumpectomy because she didn't want to remove her breast. So many things come into play. And so I did a lot of thinking, a lot of research, a lot of asking questions, and a lot of crying. And in the end, I chose, all right, I'm going to go forward. I'm just doing this double mastectomy with reconstruction right away. And, the process was a long surgery. I mean, it was like a 10-hour surgery.
Wow.
Long. Yeah.
Wow.
So, I think it shocked my husband as well. It was like, sat in the waiting room and sat, and, and it was long. So, coming out of it, there's pain, there's discomfort, it's new, it's got a different feeling. Your old bras aren't going to fit anymore. You got to start kind of rethinking about what you're going to wear after that. So, yeah. But, I read a lot of things, and all of a sudden it was like, some of the information was like, get a recliner to help lift yourself up because it's so much pain and pressure. And I didn't do that. I just said, I am going to handle it and deal with it, and I'm just going to get myself up. But that's me. If you need the recliner, get the recliner. So it's a personal journey for everybody. But I think, it's hard because, like I've said, I've had friends now going forward, and I would love to say, do this, do what I did. But it's so personal. It's such a personal thing. It's like taking away your arm or something, for some people, because some people have it where it's an identifier, like they really love how they look in clothes with the breasts that they were born with. So, I think it's choices. A lot of choices. That's why I say it's a tough thing to do. But you can do it. You can do it. And you can make the right decisions and, put a lot into it. But you can do it.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about how, when Nick asked how it felt, it can kind of be, it's a whirlwind, right? The whole experience of being diagnosed, or even knowing someone that's been diagnosed, it's being in the support system or being the one who's diagnosed. It's a physical toll, it's an emotional toll, it's, it can be a self-image toll, as you kind of talked about, especially if you do the treatment that you did. You might look in the mirror and you might see someone else, and that can take a toll on your mental image, self-esteem, all these different types of things. It could even be a spiritual toll. And you talked a little bit about your husband's support. You talked about talking to friends, crying with friends. when I introduced you in the beginning, I told our listeners that you're the mother of 3 wonderful kids. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the support you've received and that impact on your experience, but then also if you can transition that into if some of our listeners or some people that we know are supporting someone, the benefit that could have.
Yeah. So I'll just start with supporting others. I think it's really important, especially when you know somebody going through it, that you're just a good listener and somebody who's caring. I mean, again, it is a personal journey for so many, and I wish I could tell everybody I knew who was going through it that it'll be okay, but that's the crystal ball none of us have.
Right.
So, everybody gives it their A+ effort, and if you can give it your A+ effort, that is what is best. And, every person going through it feels very differently about it. I'll go back to my mom, who really laid in a chair for a solid year, literally a recliner. And that probably attests to depression and emotions that she had, and feelings of desperation in terms of life could be over. And, if I didn't think it was going to be for her, but, I can't be in her shoes. I just see what she was going through, and I would just try to do my best in getting her out and doing things with her and trying to make her feel better about herself. And that's the personal side of trying to be there for other people. I know a friend of mine had a colon cancer, and I went over and I took her out for lunch, and I would check in with her and I would call her and to see how she's doing. And all those little pieces, like sometimes people don't want to get out, or they're so upset that they just don't want to do anything. And I get that. Maybe just even going by and sitting with them for a few minutes just to lighten their day, I think it's good to do. So it's hard because sometimes people put up very big walls and have a lot of barriers to them in terms of trying to, give them that positive reinforcement because they're feeling so negative about it. But you just got to keep showing up and just doing your best to try to make their day a little better. So, and on...
The second part was the support systems that surround you.
Right.
How did that feel?
I mean, I was lucky. I felt like, though I do have to say, there's a little bit of an island that you're on your own, because it is about you. And though my goal was, and I said that before, my goal was to be there for my kids. Like, I didn't want what happened to me with my mom happen to them. So my goal was to be there for their future, to be there for their kids and their weddings, and seeing them fulfill their life as they get older. That was my ultimate goal. So, a lot of the decisions were based on what I was feeling and how I wanted it to go. And hopefully, I mean, there's always this unknown, but that was the path that I was directing. So, but I'm lucky in that I had great friends who were very supportive. Of course, your mom was one of the best, and she was so great. My sisters came and visited me, and my husband was there. And, I think for my husband, it was kind of challenging for him because it's his wife, right, going through this stuff. And so, I think on sometimes I felt like he was in my corner, and other times he would make me feel a little bit like, oh, it's okay, it's all okay. But it's still my journey. And I have to respect that he was doing his best for me. But again, it's the journey you have on your own, that you have to just hunker down and move forward and, get through this. And another friend of mine I just saw, she had chemo and everything and lost her hair, but she did this, what's this? It's a cap, some kind of a cap on your head so that you can keep your hair. And I know that was really important for her, but she just kept moving forward. And that was the big thing for her, was just moving past one treatment down, the next treatment down. And so, maybe that's another way you could support the other person who's going through this, is to just kind of be their cheer support, somebody to say, you got this, you got this.
Yeah.
Having had breast cancer and being a survivor, do you view life differently now? Do you feel any different, or has it just been, what is your experience now versus before, if it's changed at all?
Yeah, let's see. I think in terms of how I feel, I guess if I hadn't had some of the other experiences in my life where both my parents are actually gone, one died at 65, one died at 67. The one at 65 had kidney cancer. So, my family is a little bit riddled. I'm sorry. I have a little bit of
Don't
extra
apologize.
in there. Like, I
No.
guess everybody has something. So mine is that. So I definitely took my life in terms of, just appreciating what I have is probably because I've had some things happen early on.
Right.
And, the breast cancer just goes hand in hand with it, because though I always, I guess I never don't think about it, but I don't make it like it's doom and gloom for me. Like, okay, got through that, let's move to the next thing. Because that's kind of how life has been. It's been not a bowl of cherries. It's been, you get kind of like hit with something like in high school, my mother had cancer. And I'm like, what? Now all of a sudden, she is not doing well. So I was in high school when that started. So like, you just kind of have to, okay, this is the life I've been given, move forward. And I think that's kind of a good attitude anyways, because life is challenging. Like, we all have our cross to bear, they say. And, you just got to keep moving forward. And it'll be okay. So, yeah.
I like that.
A little bit of a lighter question. You mentioned that you studied biology, and I studied biology and psychology in college, and I've talked about on the podcast how when I look back, I can kind of see how like my life experiences might have led me to the path of studying what I did and the career path that I'm going currently. Do you feel like your life experience before college just kind of led you to that major, or?
Well, I always loved biology. So
Sure.
My dad was a doctor.
Okay.
So originally, I think I was thinking of going into medicine.
Okay.
My dad loved the man, but he had three girls, and
you and two sisters, right?
Me and two sisters,
yes.
And he had a little bit of that. This is like decades ago, because guys are not like this anymore. But there was a little male chauvinistic quality of him. How can you be a doctor and raise a family at the same time? And when I was younger, I said, I'd like to shadow, a medical professional. So he had me shadow a woman. Well, it was hard. I could see she was juggling. I don't know if she had her practice out of her house, but I remember it was like in a home, and I was there, and then there was kids upstairs, and there was all this chaos, and it kind of already sort of sent this weird message. Now, I don't think that's really like that today. I mean, I think it was just the experience I had and the way he kind of, how we all just sort of, impressions. We're impressionable at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, women can do it, can obviously juggle all that, as do men. But I liked the idea of biology. I always thought it was a very challenging subject for me. I did like math as well, but it came really easy. Biology was just so vast, so interesting, so many things. And I did like the idea of helping others. I actually didn't go down the medical path of going to be a doctor, but I was a pharmaceutical sales rep.
Oh,
so
sure.
I did pharmaceutical sales forever, and I eventually, when my mom got sick, I was in oncology, hematology sales. So I was talking to doctors all the time about latest therapy advancements and or new drugs that were coming out and how they were going to infiltrate into the research, or what the doctors were doing to treat various cancers. So for me, I thought it was kind of always changing. It is. It's a very interesting field.
It's a very dynamic field. There's so much happening.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I was curious with the personal question.
So I mean, I think that's why you might have gone into biology too. You've had a lot of medical, attention to yourself for years. You know, you were diagnosed when you were, I don't know, 7, 5, young.
Yeah,
super
so
young.
For those who don't know, I have a rare brain disease known as moyamoya disease, and I started developing symptoms when I was 5. So that's where you get the 5 and 7. I was fatigued easier than other kids my age. I began getting headaches, and it kind of worsened until I was about 7. And then when I was 7, it came to a point where my migraines were debilitating, and I had something called transient ischemic attacks, or TIAs, or mini strokes, where essentially, sometimes with a migraine, sometimes not with a migraine, I would go numb. My tongue would go numb, or my legs would go numb, or my arms would go numb, and essentially they became inoperable. And I was in a doctor's office once, and it was just a normal medical exam where they had the stethoscope on my back and said, deep breaths, deep breaths. The thing is, I did my deep breaths in such a way that I was over breathing, also known as hyperventilating, and I wasn't actively quickly hyperventilating, but when I did the deep breaths, there wasn't a lot of time in between breaths. And so I brought on the TIA. And so he finished his exam, he left the room, and I got off the exam table and I fell to the ground. And my mom called the doctor and screaming like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And the numbness was on my left side. I remember this. My torso was up, but my legs were down. And the left side of my torso began going numb, so I would try and keep myself up with my hand, but then I'd still keep falling. And I think I was having a kind of a complex migraine at the same time as well, because I was just kind of looking up at my mom, like smiling, which is kind of looks. We talked about horror movies last time. It kind of looked like a demon from like some sort of creepy horror movie. But I was just trying to keep myself up. But essentially, for those in the room, I was just like ha ha ha. I was like going like this, trying to keep myself up. Eventually, I went to Boston Children's Hospital and was diagnosed with had an MRI scan, which is currently, although they're working on a different way to diagnose, but currently the only way you can diagnose moyamoya disease. And so I underwent an 8-hour brain surgery on both sides of my head, and that eventually saved my life, because if I didn't have that, I would have had multiple strokes that eventually would lead to me passing away. So that was my story, but that's what you're referring to with I've had an experience, you've had some experiences that kind of led us to that path of, I feel like in a way kind of wanting to give back, like not just sitting in our own situations, but also, trying to give back to, similarly to how the physicians and the people who helped us in our situations do the same thing, whether it's through medicine or just understanding.
Yeah, or maybe even understanding it better. I felt like, for me with biology, it was always like, okay, these are the things that now I understand a little bit more about why this happens. Now, it's so complex. Our bodies are so complex. We're bigger than a machine, you know what I mean? So it's like there are things that even today, they're still not understanding. But being part of that kind of, subject matter when we went to college and we chose what we wanted to study, I liked that idea. I always liked, hearing about that stuff. So, yeah. But, it's good. We understand each other.
Yes, exactly. If anything, we can read scientific papers.
Oh my God.
That skill, and
I used to, forever.
We can kind of speak the lingo to a degree.
And I got to tell you, the one thing that I was always amazed with, so eventually with my pharmaceutical sales, I started working with a drug that actually helped childhood leukemia. And I mean, some of these little kids were so sick. And the thing that I always recalled while in those young children's wards, I always thought these kids are the most strongest and just bravest people I know, because they're going through things that adults have trouble going through. And yet they're putting on a brave face. Maybe they cry a little, but they just get through it. And it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. knowing that they are strong and so strong to do that stuff that they have to do. So, you know, when I thought of seeing that, and then I get my own diagnosis, I'm like, put on a brave face, be strong, and get through it. And I think, you know, everybody can. When you think back to some of those little people, like even yourself, you probably had no idea what you were going through at times, but you were just moving forward, because that's what life is. It's like, take it, treat it, get better, next day.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say, I don't want you to sell yourself short either, because you've kind of told a story of, I'll say from my perspective, resilience. I think you are quite a resilient individual and courageous individual, so definitely don't sell yourself short. As kind of like, we have two more questions for you, but the last one, just kind of as a all-encompassing, is there anything that you haven't mentioned that's maybe on your heart or on your head that you would like to share with our listeners that you haven't been able to already?
No, I would just say, especially for your listeners, I know some of them are young like you guys, you know, just starting life. Life is, you know, it has its highs and lows, and even while you're in your 20s and 30s, I mean, I'm past all that. So every decade that you get like more confident in yourself, and things don't bother you, and they roll off your sleeves and stuff like that. But, you know, when you're in your 20s, it's a stage of just learning and figuring it out and figuring yourself out, and there is no right answer ever. So, you know, go for it. Just try it. You're not going to make a mistake. And I think, you know, in the whole process of cancer and treatments and stuff like that, you know yourself well, and everybody wants to survive. So try to do the very best you can in picking the right decisions for yourself, and take a few minutes to do your own research, even if it's overwhelming. It can be extremely overwhelming, and there are a lot of differences. And yes, you want to rely 100% on the physician that is telling you what to do or explaining to you what they're going to do, but evaluate. Say, is this person on my side? Do they have my best interest at heart? You know, the idea that I said about the symmetry. Do I like my surgeon? Do I think they're listening to me? Are they hearing me? That I say, I want to wake up with symmetrical sides, you know? Do they hear me? Or are they just brushing me off? Because, you know, today's world, everybody is trying to do their best, like the doctors. I'm not negating the doctors, but I'm saying that, you know, they have a lot of clients that they see. They might become less desensitized to some things. And it's your first go, and you're just hearing you have a diagnosis. So force the issue. Make them hear you. Listen to what they say, and then make your decision. If that's not the right doctor, go somewhere else. There are plenty of really good doctors out there, and they could be in the big, because that was the big choice for me too. Do I want to go to the downtown Boston hospitals where there's a lot going on and they have some of the greatest minds down there, or do I want to be in a more community setting? I felt like at that time I knew the community setting that I was going for was very knowledgeable, and there were very good doctors. But the doctor that I was getting was going to be the doctor that I was going to have who was going to do the surgery. Not the doctor I was picking might have a lot of other people helping in the surgery. Right. So, you know, in the end, you got you're in charge 100%, just like your life now. You're in charge, so you're going to make the right decisions. Are you going to make mistakes? Sure, but that's okay.
It's part of the human experience.
Exactly.
And that's great advice too. I really liked that.
This is a super lighthearted question.
Yes,
coming
so this is
prepare yourself.
Yes. So we ask each guest this. It's weird.
Okay.
If you were a fruit, what would you be?
Oh, what would I
And
be?
why?
And why? Yes.
And why?
Yes, of course.
I think I would be an apple.
Okay. Why?
Why? Well, because it would be that I was sweet and liked a lot, because a lot of people like apples. And I like the idea that I'm up on a tree, so I can kind of view the world from not the ground.
Yeah.
I'd like to see above and see the outside.
I love
That's
all of the answers our guests have given.
That's the first time I think that we've gotten one about where the fruit grows. Because we've had someone say an apple.
Mm-hmm.
We had, who said apple?
Angela
said apple, yes. But she didn't mention where it grows from. I don't think anybody's done that. So thank you. That's really cool.
Yeah.
What if can we just like quickly, what have we had? We've had, you're a pineapple, I'm now a cherry and I'm sticking to it, guys. I put it on a shirt. We've had apple, lime, kiwi,
banana, pineapple. Did we say pineapple?
Yep, I said pineapple, but we also had another pineapple. Did Rachel?
Rachel was pineapple.
What was Elizabeth? Strawberry?
Strawberry.
She was a strawberry. So that's what we've had so far.
Nice.
I don't think we've missed anyone. I hope we didn't.
I hope we didn't miss anyone. Well, Marion, thank you so much for making time to talk with us today. I think your insight was nice I've heard some of it, but nice for me to hear again, kind of tell your story from the beginning and be able to ask you some questions. I think our listeners will really enjoy this episode and I think be informed by what you've said, and I really appreciate your willingness to be open and to share your experience with us today. So thank you so much for being here.
You are so welcome. And like I said, everybody, don't be afraid of any of this. Just get yourself checked out.
If you or someone you know can resonate with what Marion shared today or what we talked about on the podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. But first, reach out to your primary care physician. As Marion said, don't be afraid to ask questions. It's your health. It's your experience. And that's what your doctor is there for. You can reach out to us for questions, but definitely direct those medical questions or any concerns you might have to your primary care physician. They can help direct you further. With that, my name is Justin Dew.
I'm Nick.
And you can reach us on Instagram and Facebook at Point of Dew, that's DOO, podcast, all one word, or by sending us a voice message on our website, anchor.fm/Point of Dew. If you enjoy our show, give us a rating or review in the Apple Podcast Store, or share us with a friend or family member. We'd really appreciate it and are truly grateful for your support. As always, we hope you have a wonderful week. Thank you for listening, and until next time.
H.
Yes, we are who we are. Everything's going right. Cheers me up because time to say goodbye to myself in the past. Time to say goodbye.